This is about understanding that, okay, the personality is here to stay. And I will use the word I when I speak, and I will say I think, right? But all that's with an understanding within the conventional reality of the whole situation. That's the way we communicate as people. So we're not trying to change anything or stop doing that, no. Well, it'll stop being confusing when you just let that whole thing go and allow yourself to be a person when you're being a person, and allow yourself to know who you are when you're being a person. And it's not a matter of how you talk. It's not a question of how you talk, it's a question of what your experience is. The talk part of it is not that important. You know, we all need to use language the way language was conceived, and it was conceived to be the language for a person. And so we have to talk that way because the language is conceived to be a language of the person. But we know even when we're talking using the language of a person, we still know who we are. It's a convention. It's just what we do to communicate with one another. I mean, even if you listen to a spiritual teacher, if you listen to a spiritual teacher, they're saying I, they're saying think, and they're not having a problem with it, right? If you're having a problem with that, it's because your personality is in conflict with who you are. Your personality is trying to maintain its dominance, right? And so it will have you be confused about that. That it serves the personality to be confused, right? Rather than just let all that go and understand, it doesn't matter whether the personality is confused. See, no matter what happens, you still are who you are. That's never not the case, right? And when you get that in your bones, you stop being concerned about how you talk, right? Because if you know who you are, you're free to play in life with abandon. If you know who you are, you're free to play in life with abandon. You know, you don't have to be concerned anymore, you know, about all that stuff. You know, it's just play. It's just the way things play out in the way that we interact and communicate with one another in time and space as people like that. So that's the thing, you know. That's what I mean. If you listen to your speaking, the personality tries to control your mouth to keep itself alive, right? The same way it tries to control the thought process to keep itself alive, because it exists in thinking and speaking, right? Speaking is thinking out loud, right? Yeah. So that's what there is to see about that. That non-duality means not three, not just not two. And you see, that's the play. That's the personality trying to participate here, right? And the way to relate to that is that's not a problem. Personalities, you know, the personality can be here. The personality's not bad and wrong. The personality doesn't have to go anywhere. No. As a matter of fact, when we understand the truth of ourselves, we want to love the personality. You know, we want the personality to understand. We want the ego to understand that this is going to serve its ends. That's what, you know, these days I can't get through a talk without mentioning Ramesh, right? But that's what Ramesh Valsakar is saying. He said, no, stop this stuff about the personality in terms of it's wrong or the ego is bad, get rid of the ego, kill the ego. That's nonsense. The ego's not going anywhere. So what you want to do, if you want to take the easy road, right, is to allow the ego to experience its being welcomed, and it's not problematic. And allow the ego to understand that this is, in the end, going to serve the ego. It's going to serve the ego because the ego is going to learn that it's not bad, it doesn't have to go anywhere. Now, it's interesting that I say the ego is going to learn it's not bad and doesn't have to go anywhere, because isn't it the case in psychotherapy? Isn't that what we're dealing with when we have the person understand they're not bad and they're not going anywhere because the person's being the ego, right? So the ego can be welcomed, and the ego can be massaged, and the ego can be informed that it is now going to realize peace. It is now going to have what it really always wanted, right? And so when you relate to the ego that way, things are a lot easier. There starts to be less conflict. The mind can calm down a lot easier because something that was trying to maintain its existence starts to relax. You see what I'm saying? Something that was in a survival mode, something that was trying to maintain its existence using fear and confusion and all the other things that the personality uses the body and the brain to do, that can all start to calm down and relax. And this is what they mean in Zen when my Zen teacher talks about taking care of the mind, right? That means that we're being mindful, we're paying attention, we're staying awake, we're watching what's going on in the mind. So when the corrupt data starts to run in the program, we catch it. So when the corrupt data starts to run in the program, in other words, the mind starts going off, veering off, into this craziness about being afraid of the future and what's going to happen next and what's going to happen to me and what happened in the past and all that other mishigas, right? When that starts to happen, if you're watching, if you're wakeful, right, you see it start to happen, you catch it. Right? That the mind's veering off. It's going off into craziness. And as soon as you catch it, right, you dismiss it. Now, when I say dismiss it, I mean you see its irrelevance. You don't try and control it. You don't try and stop it, right? You simply see its irrelevance. Part of seeing its irrelevance is the same thing as seeing anything that's irrelevant. If something's irrelevant, do you continue to pay attention to it? No. You see it's irrelevant, it serves no purpose to pay attention to something that's irrelevant, right? So the natural thing to do is move your attention elsewhere to something that's relevant, right? Like what's going on, right? Instead of being in your head. Like that might be a little more relevant to your life, to pay attention to what's actually happening instead of what you think about what's happening. Because if you pay attention to what's actually happening, you're going to see possibilities for action. You're going to see ways to be. You're going to see possibilities to relate to that you can't see when you're thinking about it. Because when you're thinking about it, the thinking is limited to the database from your past experience. And that's a very small database. But when you're just there, when you're just present, when you're just receptive, then you can see what you can't see when you're thinking about it, because when you think about it, you dumb it down. You dumb it down so that the brain can manage it. But when you don't dumb it down and you just stay present to what's going on, and if you're noticing that you're present to what's going on, you start to see, I am seeing things I didn't see when I was just thinking about this. I do see things that I wasn't seeing when I was just thinking about this. So that's something to play with, as Hal said. I like the way he talked about it. There's things you can learn here that you can play with, right? That you can look and see, what's going on mentally with this. What are the thoughts that are running about this? What programming is running about this? Now, it doesn't mean that there's always going to be things going on mentally, psychologically, and emotionally that are bad or that don't work or are dysfunctional. No. There are times when, especially if you practice meditation consistently, there will be more times that happen spontaneously and naturally, right, where nothing's going on. And, and what I have found to be the case is my day becomes a day in which if I don't have anything specific I have to do, I will say, wow, great, I have some time, I can just sit there and be. You start to appreciate the possibility of being, right? You don't have to go to sleep to rest. You can sit there and be very rested. Be very rested. But not only rested physiologically, but rested mentally. You can just sit there and be still and be quiet. You don't even have to think of it as meditation. Just sit there and be still and be quiet. Let everything settle. Just let everything settle. Start watching the breath. And when you're watching the breath, one of the things that I found to be interesting is see if you can start to elongate the breath. When you start to watch the breath, see if you can start to elongate it, taking longer, deeper breaths, slower, longer, deeper breaths. And then see if you can soften the breathing. And you want to see if you can elongate the breath and slow the breath down and have the breath become quieter. Try this. This is an interesting experiment. Elongate the breath, have the breath become quieter, softer, right? So it's so subtle that your breath becomes so subtle that the awareness of being gets clearer. You see what I'm saying? Your breathing becomes so subtle. And in my experience, when you get to that subtleness, that long, deep breath, and the subtle quietness of the breath, my experience has been that it's very easy at that point to slip into a true, relaxed, clear state. Well, that's the practice, yeah. That's the practice. Be with whatever arises. We're using the breath as an anchor. You know, we're using a breath as something to come back to when we go away, right? But the idea over time, as you practice consistently and as the teachings tell us, eventually you want to abide as awareness. That's what you're referring to, abide as awareness. In other words, always be aware of being with whatever is there. Always be aware of being with whatever is there. So it's not like what's there is there and I'm this body and personality thinking about that. It's not that, right? That may happen, but at the same time that's happening, there's being always happening, right? So the question is, how consistent are you aware of the beingness thing, right? And that's why, you know, I don't know if Hal talked about this, but one way that I look at this is when you wake up in the morning, because he was talking about choosing being, right? And when I wake up in the morning, I pay close attention. This is another thing to play with. When you wake up in the morning, pay close attention to what happens. And what will happen is the voice in your head will start to talk, right? And usually it's the person waking up. You can tell because they don't like it, right? The person does not like being awake. It prefers sleep, it prefers daydreaming, all of that, right? So when the person wakes up, right, change the channel. The person wakes up, right, and starts to talk, right? And you change the channel to being aware of the awareness of that instead of that. Change the channel. And then see if you can maintain that, right? You get up out of bed, you go to the bathroom, see if you can stay aware while you're walking, see if you can stay aware when you're going to the bathroom. That's what you can play with, right? When we go to a retreat intensives, right, and we have a whole week of this, right, it becomes a very interesting experience because there is so little distracting your attention that you can really start paying close attention consistently to what's happening, you know, in terms of the thinking, what's happening with the body. And of course you do some walking meditation, sitting meditation, eating meditation, you know, all kinds of different ways, yeah, right? The typical thing that happens for most people when you come out of the busy life and go into a meditation retreat where there's no talking and everything's really highly structured, usually the mind does its best to try and stay involved, you know, so the voice in your head will start talking, you know, the usual stuff, you know, after 10 minutes, the voice in your head will start saying how much time has passed, you know, and after you're doing this for 5 days, the voice in your head is saying how many days have passed. But after a while, especially because you're having conversations and interactions with the teacher to deal with the experience you're having while you're going through the experience, right? So after a while, you kind of, through those interactions, and you have somebody to talk about whatever's happening for you, through those interactions, usually by the 5th or 6th day, there's a lot of awareness and less activity. A lot of awareness and less activity. And it's a very pleasurable experience. And I don't think, you know, it's very hard to have that experience in your ordinary life, in your ordinary routine. But if you retreat from that, if you remove yourself from that, and give yourself the gift of a week out of that life, right? And then just go full bore into using that opportunity to pay attention to awareness so that when you come out of the retreat, your ability to abide in awareness is stronger, the muscle's stronger from all that practice like that. If you continue to practice and if you continue to learn, at some point it would be naturally interesting for you and naturally part of the process to do a retreat. to go to take yourself out of the activity life and really allow yourself to discover what it's like to be in a place where your only work and your only intention is to be. That's the whole thing. When you go on a retreat, the whole purpose of the retreat is to experience being as consistently as possible, day and night, walking, sitting, eating, the whole 9 yards. I mean, one thing is for sure, if you do a 7-day retreat in the Zen tradition, your person or personality will weaken, seriously weaken during that week. And then you get to see what that's like. What would it be like if your personality, was drawing less energy, was taking less of your attention? What would that be like?